that I've known for several years, going back to my stint down in Texas. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jim Moulthrop.
Let's see if I get this straight. The subject of this session is called The State and Direction of the Asphalt Industry. And of course, this is the Association of Modified Asphalt Producers meeting. And so here's a guy up here who's going to talk about FP2. You know, what is that? And how does that have anything to do with why we're here? Well, I hope by the end of the next 20 minutes or so, you'll get a little bit of better flavor for that. FP2 really is a short term for the Foundation for Pavement Preservation. We've been around since 1992 in various forms, various names, and we've been incorporated in various ways in accordance with the laws and regulations of the Internal Revenue Service. I won't bore you with all those details. But at any rate, I wanted to talk to you about FP2, what we do, and how it's involved with the asphalt modifier business. So, presentation outline like most everybody else has, what our mission is and who are our supporters. And then three things that we do in terms of our mission statement, if you will, or what we work on: advocacy, research, and communication. And I think when you get to the advocacy and research part of it, you'll get a little bit of better flavor of how it relates to what you all are trying to do from time to time. So what is FP2? We're an industry-supported trade association, just like AMAP. We're organized the same way. Our purpose, as you see here, is protecting and preserving the huge investment. As Jim mentioned yesterday, the amount of money involved with pavements in this country is enormous, has been, will continue to be. And something like 93% of the pavements in the U.S. are asphalt in one way, shape, or form, whether they're cold or hot or somewhere in between. So our whole notion is to protect that investment in many, many ways, and using various materials, which I'll cover a little bit. So who supports us? You see a list of folks here that provide funding for some of the things that we do. Associations, various associations, contractors, material suppliers, polymer suppliers, equipment manufacturers, consultants, etc. A whole list of folks. And we typically, in making our presentations, like to put up their logos to make sure that we recognize their contribution to what we do. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a number of associations that range from the Asphalt Institute to NAPA, the International Grinding and Grooving Association, and then a number of companies on the left, corporate sponsors that provide us the funding to help us do what we do. So what do we do? One of the things is in about 2002, we had a lot of discussions with Michigan State University about founding a national center for pavement preservation to try to work on training, communication, and efforts related to preserving pavements. And so part of the deal with Michigan State is if you want to establish a center there, you have to pony up some funds. And you have to do that yearly. So we contribute $50,000 every year to Michigan State in order to support the center that is there. They do a lot of work. A lot of you are familiar with what they have done. There are a number of, used to be two centers in Texas and California, pavement preservation regional centers. One's at Chico State. The other was at UT Austin. We work closely with them. Also, the regional preservation partnerships that exist in the Rocky Mountain West, in the Southeast, the Midwest, Northeast. We work with those groups. And then finally, we've had a long-standing relationship with Federal Highway Administration in the pavements group, in asset management, et cetera. since about 1998 when we signed an agreement with them to work closely and trying to get word out about why it's important to take care of our pavements. So what do we do? Advocacy, I mentioned earlier, along with research and communication, but specifically in terms of advocacy, educate public officials at all levels involved with legislation. And I'll spend a little time on that, kind of following on what Matt said earlier today and what Jim had mentioned yesterday in his talk. Secondly, communication. We sponsor some key events. We publish a journal quarterly containing a lot of stories and case histories of pavement preservation activities. And we also distribute educational materials. Some of you may have run across at one time or another these little pocket guides that fit in your shirt pocket that talk about 14 different applications ranging anywhere from fog seals to dial bar retrofit in concrete pavements, little how-to, what to be looking for, what are some of the guidelines in terms of application and so forth. And then finally, research. We're a funding partner, as Buzz mentioned earlier, with the 7-state NCAT 2012 Preservation Group experiment. And something that I'll cover a little bit more too is the 2015 NCAT and Minroad project that's currently underway. So advocacy. We have a contract with the firm Williams & Jensen in Washington, D.C. They're a law firm. They're also lobbyists. They cover both sides of the aisle. They have 28 partners, 14 Republicans and 14 Democrats, so they can make sure that they can talk either side of the aisle when they're talking legislation. We were very, very involved from 2009 till 2012 with trying to get pavement preservation language in MAP 21. Some of you may know that before MAP 21 came out, the question was, are some of these treatments eligible for federal funds? For example, if I wanted to do a seal coat or a microsurfacing or a fog seal or some such thing on the NHS, National Highway System, I may want to use federal funds to help offset some of the funding that I need to have in my own agency. You'd go to the Federal Highway Administration division office, and a division engineer or some of their staff might say, well, that's an eligible activity, go ahead. Whereas others would say, no, it's not. Can't do that. Can't use federal funds for that. So having it codified in the law through MAP 21 makes it very clear that these treatments are eligible for the use of federal funds. So that was a huge step for the preservation industry, at least we felt it was. And so the next thing was that you know from yesterday's talk that MAP 21 was a 27-month bill funded for 2 years, very short term, if you will. And so what was going to happen after that, and as you know, there's the FAST Act that was signed in December 2015, which is a 5-year bill rather than a two-year bill. So we spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill trying to persuade people about why there's a need to preserve the pavements that we have, how it's very cost effective, and so forth. Most of the time you're dealing with staffers. Very, very seldom would you ever meet with a representative, but it ranged anywhere from saying, we understand the industry represented in the territory that I represent. We understand how many people you employ. Some of your contractors work here. We understand that. Then on the other hand, it would be the staffer who would say, after 2 minutes and talking about pavement preservation, would say to you, how do you build a road anyhow? And so your first thought is, you got to be kidding me. You know? Well, no, he wasn't. So up to the whiteboard I go with my, when I start to draw this and subgrade and subbase and surface course and so forth, and saying, well, that's kind of how you'd go building a road. He said, well, thanks very much. I'm not sure that bought us any time or any efforts within what we were trying to accomplish, but it ranged from, as you can imagine, stem to stern, in terms of knowledge and so forth about our representatives and what they understand about what we do. And I can tell you that where we have been very successful, and I would suggest that you think about it, is that where we get the representative to visit one of our facilities, one of ours meaning our contractor, our material suppliers or whatever, where we've taken representatives out, showed them what a hot mix plant looks like, or whether a tank farm, or whether it's an emulsion plant or whatever, and spend the time with some of your employees on what you do and why you do it and how it's important for business in that area. What a great impact that is. It's been very successful where we've been able to pull it off. So advocacy effort, as you heard, it was passed in December of last year. It increased funding a little bit for the first year, and then a little bit less than that through 2020. I will tell you this, that I don't think Jim used the term funny money. That's what I call the stuff. You remember the list that he had on the board of where the funding was coming from for the FAST Act? I'll remind you, the very first one was from the Federal Reserve Board. Let me think about this. Federal Reserve, that's banking, right? What does that have to do with transportation? But there's $40 billion in excess funds sitting in the Federal Reserve. So, hey, there's 40, we'll take out of that. And on down the list of where he came up with, I believe, $71 or $72 billion in order to fund the FAST Act. Well, guess what? In 2020, that money's gone. It's nowhere there. It's not there anymore. So the question is, for a lot of us, and something that we're dealing with right now is, what's our ask in terms of when the FAST Act expires on how we are going to suggest that we raise revenue? Where's it going to come from? Heard Jim yesterday say gas tax or user fee is a dead on arrival, just like the president's $10.25 a barrel of oil increase as Congress and the House said, it's dead on. It's not even dead on arrival. It's not even dead on delivery. So they're not even going to invite, as you heard yesterday, any of the administration over to discuss the budget. So a couple of things, that one of the interesting things you'll see here in the FAST Act, there have been from time to time in some of the transportation bills grants, but this is showing a little bit more in the FAST Act. You'll see here it converts the transportation plan to a surface transportation block grant program. You also see under freight there's a $900 million per year in large-scale grants. So those have to be applied for. Those aren't just going to be automatically delivered to the agencies to make that happen. Interesting. A little bit more that would be appropriate for you. In the 2012 study at NCAT, specifically on Lee Road, 159 that you've heard about, there were 23 different treatments and 2 control sections in that 2,500-foot section of pavement that runs into a hot mix plant in the quarry. And there were a number of treatments that were placed. And so what are some of the things that we found out so far? The idea is, with that study, is that there's existing condition, and then treatment was placed, and we're going to wait and measure performance and distress until it comes back to the original condition. So based on some of the treatments that were placed, whether they were thin lays or whether they were various emulsion applications, it may be 5, 6, 7, 10 years before they ever reach original condition or pre-treatment condition. So it's going to be a while these things are monitoring, but are there some things that we've learned so far that we could talk about? And I'll show you a list here, and your first thought is going to be, gee, I knew that. What's new about that? Well, I'll guarantee you, if you go to the literature and try to find some of this stuff that's been measured and documented and not anecdotal by some survey that somebody did, this is the first time that some of this stuff is going to appear in writing. Is that important? You bet. It's important for your industry. It's important for preserving pavements as well. So crack sealing improves cracking performance. What does that mean? It says, well, if you seal cracks, you don't get cracking as much as you would if you didn't seal them. The second thing is you'll see about crack sealing is there's some differences in performance between whether you route the crack and fill it or whether you just blow it out and band it. And in most instances, the route and fill is more effective. Scrub seals. Maybe some of you have never seen a scrub seal or don't know what it is. I have some equipment to show you, but it exhibits both crack and seal coat or chip seal benefits. In other words, you put a scrub seal down first, mass crack treatment, if you will, and then you put some kind of a seal on the top of it, whether it's a seal coat, chip seal, microsurfacing, thin lay, or whatever. It's very effective in preserving that pavement as compared to if you just put the seal coat or other treatment on without the scrub seal. JP mentioned this morning in his presentation that little device of either getting samples out of the pavement, and what we've seen so far is the fact that these treatments, and it didn't make any difference whether it was a seal coat or a micro or a thin layer or whatever, they're actually reducing the amount of oxidation you'd expect in that underlying pavement. So another benefit that we see of these treatments. There's also, each one of these sections has a probe down to subgrade level, and they have a nuclear device that measures moisture that they check once a month. And they've seen a significant decrease in moisture at the subgrade level when we place these treatments as compared to control. Now again, you would say, gee, that makes a lot of sense. That's pretty intuitive. Try to find it in literature. And of course, they're developing these life-extending benefit curves, and will continue to do so until it reaches the pre-treatment condition. And finally, this will continue to be done on Lee Road, even though that was part of the last cycle, as well as monitoring what's being, is to take a look at how these treatments, same treatment that was placed in southeast Alabama, not the same materials. We're not hauling rock from Alabama to Minnesota, but we're taking the same treatments, microsurfacing, fog seals, seal coats, double, single, triple chips, that type of thing. We're going to do the same thing in Minnesota as done in Alabama. And the question was, what's the impact of climate and the materials that are used in those areas in terms of the treatment and the performance of those treatments? So it's, from the point of view of collaboration, it's a very exciting one between Minnesota DOT and NCAT. NCAT is actually the contractor. Minnesota is a subcontractor to them on this. And you heard Buzz say earlier that there's a little bit of setback and a little bit more work that needs to be done because of the DOT's requirements in terms of purchasing materials and contractors and so forth. So treatments were done on US 280 in Alabama last August. And you saw some of the photographs that Buzz showed you this morning about that. The same type of treatments, as I said, will be built on a low volume and a high volume road in Minnesota. He also mentioned the easels in terms of how much has been applied to the track and Lee Road and US 280, et cetera, so I won't bore you with all those details. But, for example, here's Auburn University in Alabama, and here's the NCAP facility, which is about 1.5 miles south of downtown Auburn. And the Lee Road project is right here. It's very close. And here is the NCAT track. So again, it's not terribly far away. And then US 280 is right here in terms of being pretty well located to where it's fairly easy to do the monitoring that's necessary on both Lee Road and US 280 as time goes on. In Minnesota, work is going to be done at Min Road, the facility on I-94, as well as some other areas just north of there where they're going to be dealing with a low volume and a high volume roadway. So that work is intended to begin this June. What's going to happen, take the same treatments that were done on Lee Road, that were done on 280, that will be done in Minnesota. And you saw this map earlier. It doesn't have the yellow banding around it where Buzz's map did, but it gives you some idea of the 17 agencies that are involved along with industry. US 280, 4-lane highway. I think about 9 years old, if I'm not mistaken. 15,000 total ADT, so it gives us a pretty good look at putting some of these treatments on that type of volume roadway. Alabama DOT was very gracious in actually allowing NCAT and the rest of us to participate in this study. So, what did we do? I don't know whether you can read any of this, but every single one of the treatments placed on Lee Road and placed on 280 were modified binder, whether they were modified hot mix or whether they were modified emulsions. But every one of them contained modified materials. So some of the things that we think are going to be great for your industry and the totality of preserving pavements is, what's the effect and what is the bang for the buck, so to speak, of placing some of these treatments under these conditions. And this, you see a lot of different treatments here that range, well, here's a double air chip. Here's the Cape Seal, which is microsurfacing over the top of a single chip, single layer microsurfacing with some crack sealing, fiber mat Cape Seal, scrub seal, and so forth. And then a number of various hot mix treatments, or thin lays as they're called these days. Basically 4.75 millimeter mixes with a whole host of different things, including wrap, RAS, various things, cold in place recycling, both central plant mix as well as in place. At any rate, I think the list grows to 38 different treatments, plus control sections. Yeah, 38. I got that right for a change. And you see that there's some very hard tack that was applied on some of this work too that some of you might be familiar with. So it's quite a laundry list of things. Each one of these sections is 528 feet long, which kind of accommodates the ability of making some measurements on the pavement surface that we weren't able to do on Lee Road because they were 100 feet. So this gives us a little bit better picture. So these will be duplicated in Minnesota. And give you a little idea, crack sealing, you've seen this done many, many times, probably even Jerry's picture of that zebra, I guess he called it. It's kind of interesting, but on several of the sections we did some crack sealing, and this pavement was not cracked very much, so there's not an awful lot of that done on 280. This is on 280. Verifying the application rates of both the aggregate and the binder. We had a special area near the NCAT lab where it was strictly a calibration site. And before any of this equipment was taken out on US 280, or Lee Road for that matter, it was calibrated to make sure we were getting the application rates for both spray applied materials, aggregates, and hot mix as well. So, and when we got on the project, then we also made sure that we were verifying the application rates as well by putting down pads in the aggregate areas and putting down the same kind of pads. Had a portable lab there on the job where we actually weighed the emulsion to make sure we were getting the right amount. Basically spraying down a polymer modified emulsion, brooming it into the surface of the pavement, and then putting a chip on the top of it. That could be the surface, or it has another surface placed on the top of it. You can think about it as a mass crack treatment. Instead of sealing all these cracks individually like you saw a minute ago, you're actually filling the entire pavement section. Pretty standard application used in several parts of the U.S. Missouri, I guess, is the one that I ran into it the first time and where it's been used extensively. It was helping, again, with some of the testing that was done. These are the people, in addition to the contributors to FP2 that I showed you before, the associations on the right and the companies on the left, we had to go out, as we did in 2012, with a separate solicitation for funds in order to be a full funding partner in this work. And so, again, you see some of the people here that are a little bit different than maybe our normal supporters like Slurry Pavers and others on here, and all 4 of the pavement preservation partnerships provided funding in this effort as well. In case you're wondering, the total amount of funding required to participate in the study is $120,000 a year, or $360,000 for the 3-year study. So it's very important, and we're thankful very much for the support that we've gotten from all these folks in order to participate. When we first started the Lee Road project, and if you think of NCAT, and I think Buzz says they've had a number of cycles, maybe 6 or 7 or more, but you know what NCAT is, it's the National Center for Asphalt Technology. And what do they deal with? They deal with hot mix. So when the idea is that they were going to put some pavement preservation treatments on Lee Road, what do? How do we do it? Who does this type of stuff? It didn't quite get to the point of what an emulsion is, but, you know, on that order of things. So they really relied greatly at the beginning in Lee Road with FP2 to try to help them sort through these things. What's the right treatment? Where should we place it? What are the conditions, et cetera, and then relied on industry in particular from the emulsion supplier point of view and the contractor point of view of, is this doable? And what materials should we use? There was a discussion maybe yesterday or so about a proliferation of specifications. And the first part of Lee Road and that 7-state involvement, the question was, are we going to use a CRS-2P? 7 states, 7 specs. Which one do we use? So you know, that kind of a debate had to take place in order to figure out how we're going to do these things. And that's where our involvement got pretty good and pretty exciting, because we were able to shape some of the work, if you will. We didn't control it, but we tried to shape it and give them as much help as we could through the process. So looking at that third leg, that advocacy, research, and communication, this is something we try to do as well. We publish a quarterly journal. As I mentioned earlier, usually contains case studies and various projects that have been done in a whole wide variety, whether they're thin lifts or they're diamond grinding or whatever, because IGA is one of our supporters, so we represent both industries. But for the most part, most of this work that you see here, of course, is all dedicated to asphalt pavements. We also have a website. We try to keep it pretty current. We have a series of areas there that talk about various treatments, how to do them, what are the materials involved, et cetera, et cetera. We also yearly try to present an award for excellence in pavement preservation. The first one was done, as you'll see here, in 2005 or 6. And Jim Sorensen, of course, who was with Federal Highway, you heard, passed away in 2009. And after he passed, we decided that we would rename this award in honor of Jim for his passionate work with pavement preservation for a long, long time. So we asked for subscriptions or applications for the Pavement Preservation Award, and I would ask you if you have any knowledge of projects or agencies in particular at any level, whether they're cities or counties or state or whatever, that have a progressive pavement preservation program that they're pretty proud of, whether they're in Timbuktu or whether they're in the United States or whatever. We'd welcome your application, and there's information on our website on how to do it. what's included and what are the measurement process and then decision. We have a committee that reviews this just like a lot of other associations in making awards. 2005 was the city of LA. You see here a number of counties and state DOTs. And the award in 2015, again, was given to the city of LA. We went out to Los Angeles and presented the award to them in December of last year. Typically, we would do it at a partnership meeting, but they wanted to get a lot of press, if you will, on the award itself. And they basically taped the entire presentation, and the mayor was going to be there. Unfortunately, the day we made the presentation was the day when they closed all the LA schools because of the concern about terrorists and so forth. So the deputy mayor had to show up, and we have her on tape and so forth. But at any rate, it's amazing the kind of response that you get when you do make an award to somebody like the city who is going to use it because they have a great program. It'll be covered in the next issue of the Journal, which is under publication right now, and there's a story in there about it. But at any rate, that's kind of FP2, who we are and what we do, and why we do it, and how it fits in to your business area. So I hope that I've been able to kind of present a collage of things that tell you a little bit more about us and why we do it. And by the way, thanks for coming back after the break. I know a lot of you probably thought about catching your flight, but you knew that Pete and I were on the program, and you just had to stick around and hear us. So we appreciate it very much. I'd be glad to take any questions now or later. I'll be here. Thank you.
Jim, while you were speaking, I told everybody that I've known you quite a while, and I started thinking about our first project together. And long before Jim and FP2 became respected industry leaders, we did have some questionable early projects, and this is one that Michael O'Leary put us on. It was how many years to turn a crack fill into a fog seal. This one didn't go so well. Yeah, Are there any questions for Jim? Okay, then moving right along.